Welcome to another installment of our deck introduction series in the Frozen Throne era, featuring Control Warlock. Since the Molten Giant cost increase and the loss of Antique Healbot in April 2016, the Control Warlock archetype struggled to find an identity and standard outside of Reno Jackson. When that too rotated into Wild, the class only saw fringe play in zoo and discard decks for several months. Many wondered if the Control Warlock archetype would ever make a return to competitive play. It's a question that has resurfaced again and again with the release of every expansion since April 2016. With the launch of the Knights of the Frozen Throne and the additions of Defile, Despicable Dreadlord, as well as Death Knight Blood Reaver Gul'dan, Control Warlock has finally made a successful return to competitive play as a Tier 2 deck with a demonic twist. Control Warlock has two main features that make it one of the best anti-aggro control decks on the ladder. The first is a range of strong single-card AoE removal. Hellfire is the most infamous of these, having forced many an aggro deck to not overcommit by turn 4 in fear of losing anything with 3 health or less. The other AoE card, and one of the main reasons for the archetype's return, is Defile. It's a removal spell that is ideal against opponents who rely on a wide, fragile board state in the early game, like Token Shaman or Zoo, but can combo with Tainted Zealot to wipe out larger boards. Cards such as these are what make it possible to stall the game long enough to access your big threats consistently. The second feature is large minions. Twilight Drake and Mountain Giant become the ultimate turn 4 drops when life tapping for resources in your first few turns. With Silence Effects and Big Game Hunter having lost some popularity in the latter, expect either minion to establish a strong early game board presence that most decks will have a hard time removing. If they're ignored, cards like Faceless Shambler and follow-up plays such as Siphon Soul or another Twilight Drake or Mountain Giant will allow you to capitalize on your superior board presence. Control Warlock aims to create large tempo swings with this combination of removal and big minions to survive until the late game. With Voidwalker, Despicable Dreadlord, and Abyssal Enforcer, you have demons that contribute powerful effects for their mana cost, which also provide a late game strategy. By turn 10 or later, you have one of the biggest board swings in the game, thanks to Blood Reaver Gul'dan, which resummons every friendly demon that died as its battlecry effect. With the resources your opponent had to invest to remove them the first time, along with your Giants and Twilight Drakes, playing the Warlock Death Knight will challenge your opponent to remove the demons again, while they also deal with arguably one of the best late-game hero powers in the game, dealing 3 damage against minions to control the board or against the opponent directly for burn, all while regaining 3 health a turn. While pro players continue to experiment with traditional handlock lists, we continue to see the most success on the ladder and in tournaments with decks led by Blood Reaver Gul'dan and his Legion of Demons. Control Warlock is at its best when combating aggro and mid-range decks that rely on a wide board presence for their win condition. Because of the class's ability to draw deeper into your deck, thanks to the life tap hero power, you can afford to mulligan more aggressively for aggro matchups, while relying on the hero power to draw into your mid-game threats. As tempting as it may be to keep 2 Mountain Giants and 2 Twilight Drakes against Druid, and with the deck no longer playing taunt activators, such as Sunfury Protector and Defender of Argus, Control Warlock players will regularly need to assume their opponent is playing an aggressive archetype of their class, if their class has any aggro decks in Tier 1 or 2 at the time. You will otherwise find your health total diminishing faster without any early game survivability. With aggro Druid and mid-range Murloc Paladin becoming more popular decks to contest J Druid, Control Warlock in its current iteration is well positioned to beat those decks with the tools at its disposal. Your best tool in any of these matchups is Defile. Actively mulliganing for Defile and Doomsayer will give you enough breathing room to life tap for more mid-game threats, especially Despicable Dreadlord and Abyssal Enforcer to provide AoE damage effects while establishing a board presence. Hellfire and Earthring Farseer are your secondary targets for your opening hand against aggro decks, while Mortal Coil and Twilight Drakes are welcome pulls. As long as you either have Doomsayer or Defile, you'll be well positioned to make it to the mid-game. If neither are in your hand and you expect an aggressive opponent, it'll be worth tossing your hand. The early game strategy of the deck is to survive the first wave of minions until you can wipe their board with a Hellfire or Defile. Then play your big 4 mana and 5 mana drops, with Siphon Soul to regain some life, while clearing up more of the board to help pressure your opponent and close out the game. Against Priest or Mage, where their strongest archetypes are more control-centric, always mulligan for Twilight Drake and Mountain Giants. Though Control Warlock is built as a control deck, it will regularly be the aggressor in control matchups. Playing minions with a high stat total that can threaten significant damage will put the responsibility on your opponent to respond, while you ideally continue dropping large minions and saving removal on high-priority targets, such as Lyra the Sunshard for Priest, or Doomsayer and Antonidas for Mage. You will eventually grind your opponent out of enough resources that a late-game Blood Reaver Gul'dan will be devastating. The later in the game you hold on to your Death Knight, the more demons you'll have played by then to make its effect all the more powerful. However, don't let that stop you from playing it earlier, especially against decks like Exodia Mage that are rewarded by playing against slower strategies. Being able to threaten 3 damage every turn, along with a Hellfire and Abyssal Enforcer, will put the Exodia Mage on a clock and force them to draw into their combo pieces sooner than they'd like. We feature Urana's Control Warlock list as a well-positioned deck in the current meta with the best results so far. There are several tech options that make Control Warlock one of the more adaptable decks in the current meta, with some legend lists even dropping Mountain Giant, in favor of more removal and greater reliance on the Demon synergy with Blood Reaver Gul'dan. Tutor reached Legend 19 on the same day Urana reached Legend 1, while also playing Control Warlock, the only difference between the lists being 2 Faceless Manipulators instead of the Second Defile and Black Knight. With how difficult it is to remove Mountain Giant and Twilight Drake on turn 4, being able to capitalize on these minions and push for a larger board presence with great damage potential would put the deck in a better position against mid-range and control decks, if he can make do with less answers for aggro and large taunt minions. Mistress of Mixtures and Drained Soul have seen regular rotation in many lists. Their value as anti-aggro cards can't be understated if aggressive decks continue to see prevalence. The most notable list making these changes would be Jake Finney's anti-aggro Control Warlock, which prioritizes the deck's anti-aggro strategy while replacing Mountain Giants with Twisting Nether, relying on Medivh the Guardian to improve mid-range and control matchups, and Blood Reaver Gul'dan to close out the game. Spellbreaker has seen regular use, offering a means of removing buffs, nerfs, and significant effects. Acidic or Gluttonous Swamp Ooze will help improve the pirate matchups, especially if you're able to wait long enough to remove a buffed Arcanite Reaper. With the Lich King, Bonemare, and the Paladin class seeing a lot of play, the Black Knight would make for a great addition to your deck in the meta. Skulking Geist also continues to see more regular play in control decks, particularly in lists that can pressure Jade Druid in the late game, or at least has a means of removing late game Jades. Consider adding a Lich King of your own if you run into more slower decks on your ladder climb. After several seasons of Control Warlock being left behind in the continuing evolution of Hearthstone, the archetype has returned as a consistent anti-aggro option for the ladder, while finding recent tournament success in the finals of the Hearthstone Global Games last weekend, with the Czech Republic getting a win from their iteration of Control Warlock against Ukraine's mid-range Murloc Paladin. Pavel also found recent success with Handlock in the most recent European Summer Playoffs. It's a powerful deck to play on the ladder due to its indiscriminate variety of board clears, access to large minions, and a hero power that gives the deck consistency and options. If you're looking to play a deck that is primed for ladder and tournament play, then Control Warlock will be worth adding to your arsenal. As always, thank you for watching. Leave us a like on the video if you enjoyed this deck introduction. Let us know which one you'd like to see next, and subscribe to the channel for more Tempestorm content, including our most recent meta snapshot of the Frozen Throne meta.